Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 4 of season 3 of the Driving Talk podcast. I'm back here with Max Coates. Paul Harvey is stuck in Kent, and we've got a guest on here today that knows a bit about Porsches and Tyrestacks. Goddamn Tyrestacks. We're going to be talking about those today because I started getting irrationally angry at the TV at the weekend. Just the same as Max probably got irrationally angry at an invoice that's been sent through to him. But we'll get the niceties over and done first. Good evening, Max, and good evening to Chris Dymond, professional driver coach. Good evening, guys.
Evening.
Hello. It sounded like Top Gear there. I feel like we're off into like some kind of challenge to start with or something like that. So
yeah, tonight, Max gets angry at the price of Porsche parts, and Chris shows him where he could have been 3/10 faster.
That happens on a daily basis. So both of them things, to be fair.
But I will just say now, Max, we talk to you as the official points leader for the Cayman Sprint Challenge. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think Chris will back up that it's not just me leading in RS Pro. We've also got Jacob Toss leading in RS Am and Jonathan Beeson leading in Club Sport Am. So across Porsche Sprint Challenge, Graves have locked out the 3 drivers' standings championships that we're going for. And a bit of an unfortunate weekend for Ethan means that we're not quite leading the overall RS championship. But yeah, it's a bit early to start getting too excited about it. But yeah, we're certainly in a good position and where I'd rather be. But that said, we've got 2 rounds to come, some very quick opposition, and I'd be lying if I wasn't thinking about it, but I'm trying not to. So I'm very aware that we're in the position that we're in because we've done a good job of worked well with Chris, with Dave as engineer, and we've just focused on every session and getting the most out of it. And if we take our eye off the ball of doing that at Silverstone, then we won't be champions come the end of Brands. So the aim is just to keep ticking each session by as it goes and going as fast as we can possibly do on track. So, but yeah, it's a good place to be. We're 8 points in front. That's pretty sweet.
And Chris, the hard work you've been doing with the team all throughout the year has culminated in, as we've said, sitting in quite a good position. The job's not done yet. So what's your role now moving forward? Have you got to manage the expectations, or is it just a case of keep doing what you're doing?
A little bit of both, I think. We'll see probably this pendulum swing in all the championships, maybe a little bit between, because there is, 2 rounds and 6 races left. Hopefully the momentum will stay with us. We've got to make sure that we don't become complacent because the championship is very tight. I think there's really 3 drivers that are going to be fighting for the championship come the end of it in the RS Pros. The RS Am, there's probably 1 or 2 that are going to fight, and in the Club Sport Am, it's really between 2. So as long as we can keep the momentum that we've got and make sure that we keep evolving the car, which I think everyone is still learning, and we've all caught up to Parker, and then Toro Verde have caught us, and it's sort of everyone's just compressing at the top. So the margins are going to be fine. So it's an element of making sure everybody keeps pushing and we don't get complacent, and then the expectation is just making sure that any pressure isn't direct on us. So we want to make sure that it's dispersed so we don't have any pressure-induced failures or mistakes. So it's quite a lot to do and quite a lot to get through, but it's something I think we can hold off, and hopefully we'll end the year where we are now, plus leading the team's championship.
Yeah, and Max, Graves Motorsport, you mentioned Dave Graves there, came into Porsches brand new to the Caymans last year. You're now in year 2. How key has it been having the team learn so quickly about the mannerisms of these cars and work with yourself and all the other drivers in the team to make the car work for them as best they can?
Well, to be honest, Dave was a very key part of me staying with the team this year. So after our first year in Caymans, there's a bit of interest in different areas, not just within Caymans, but within other teams within Caymans, and really the engineering side that Dave brings and the data analysis that Chris brings, and that familiarity for me is what made me want to stay at Graves, because I knew that would be the best place for me to go and win the championship. And so far, 4 rounds in, then I'm so far proven to be right. So that's Dave puts a lot of work in. He's very much a see it engineer. He watches it because he's felt it before as a driver, but he understands how the car works as an engineer, and so he's not always on a laptop looking at different numbers and that sort of thing. That's a bit more Chris's department, and then Dave sees what he sees, and between the three of us we make the recommendations. But yeah, so far it's going in the right way. So I think it's probably not too far off since I was wearing this top that I was last leading a championship on Toka. So I think it'd be 2019 would be my last time that I was leading a championship. So some like 5 years ago, and it's been a long time really. So yeah, the sort of troublesome years in the minis are well behind us, and now back to kind of leading ways in this single mate championship.
And is that why you've gone for the shirt tonight? You've gone for the retro look?
No, I've just been cleaning my car because I need to sell it to pay for some Porsche bits. So I've been. I'm in the old top. That's why. So the reason I was a bit late back is I thought somebody was coming to look at buying my car tonight. It's kind of giving me the hurry up to sell it because it's a bit of a hefty bill after the weekend. So I keep using the excuse we were fast, but I've still got to pay the bill. So yeah, there's a BMW that needs to be sold if anybody wants one.
Right. Well, to give readers some context, so obviously we're talking about the Donington weekend. This is the Thursday night after all has happened. And Chris, you've actually been back to Donington today. So are those crappy tyre stacks still there?
One of them was. I think the one that caused Max the most pain, unfortunately, was still there on the first part of the. Actually, no, it was the second one. It was the right.
I think it's the right-hander that probably did.
Yeah, so that one had gone, but the one on the left,
out of the way.
First part. It was a Greystone GT test yesterday and the day before, I think. So they probably got rid of those, and then there's quite a few British GT cars and GB4, GB3 testing today. So they sort of opened it up a bit. But yeah, and to be fair, the one on the left had been moved back a chunk as well from where it was at the Toka weekend. So things were changing for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to come at this from a purely club racer point of view. I raced at Donington GP earlier in the year and the Tyrestacks were there, and you are quite wary of them. And then the British Touring Car Championship rolls into town, which has got arguably some of the best one-make series in the country, if not in Europe, with the Porsche Sprint Challenge, Porsche Carrera Cup, F4 championships like that. And then you've got what's supposed to be the pinnacle of British motorsport. And, you know, we start off with Andrew Watson, has that monumental shunt earlier in the day. And for all intents and purposes, certainly from the footage I've seen as well as from the still imagery, did he get a tap or did he just lose the back end on cold tyres? What happened?
I've not actually seen a video on that. I don't know, Max, if you have.
Do you know what? I haven't, and I'm just going to do a little Google of it because I haven't actually seen it. So
it's got some impressive looking stills, but
yeah. I mean, there's a real type video that I've seen, which is it actually looks like Andrew Watson loses the back under braking. I can't see another car close enough to him to make contact.
He just had a bit of a wobble, so.
Yeah, it's not difficult to do on because they'll be braking just after the brow of the hill going in there and trying to carry as much as they can. So in a wrong-wheel drive car, that could quite easily happen.
Yeah, so, you know, from again, I'm just a mere club racer. Chris, you're a professional. You teach some of these guys how to be within the minute, you know, the thousandths of a second faster than they already are. Max, you're a professional racing driver as well. From your point of view, how frustrating must it be for you guys to, first of all, see that happen and then kind of take us through the emotions of what happened to you during the race? Because you must be... I know you're kind of in the moment, but you must be just clipping those bales thinking, shit, that's going to be a few quid.
I think the bigger thing is they give you a bit of margin where they actually fold out part of the conveyor belting, so it's a floppy that you can rub and it will deform. Then if you're within, if you take that extra millimetre, then you're down to a very, very solid object. And with particularly the GT4 RS with its recyclable and eco-friendly resins and bodywork on the front corners, it's a exaggerated expense if you do knock it. And of course, you have to be knocking it. We're in a championship where last year the top three were regularly qualifying within a tenth of each other. I think at Brands, the final round, the top three were within half a tenth. So if you're slow through the chicane because you're wary of this, little bit of rubber, then it could feasibly cost you 1/4 of a second, which I think would have put, on an average quali, the gap at the qualifying first to second was 0.4, and then 4th to 8th was 1/10.5. So if you just missed that first bit, you could have ended up at the bottom half of the top 10, and because you just were a little bit cautious. So there's no real, think of the right word to say here.
You can't treat it kindly, can you? You've got to go for it.
Yeah, there's the risk versus the reward is significant. It's just unfortunate that the cost is so exaggerated when unfortunately you just take, and it will only be a matter of 5 or 10 millimeters. We're not taking trying to take a foot. It is the minutiae of the difference there, and it is just such a shame. As I said, it can, particularly in the RS where it is exaggerated, that the cost is so great.
But how frustrating must that be for you, Max? Because you're still operating on a budget. I mean, it's not as if you're just going, you've got to sell a car to pay for Porsche bits now.
Yeah.
To go and do that. I mean, how annoying must that be?
Yeah, it's not exactly ideal. I'd love to say that my car's worth 20 grand, but it's not. So, if it's probably like $2,000 car, but even so, it's not exactly ideal, and it's a difficult one, really. So, I mean, I'll give you an idea. So, price wise, so pretty much everybody in the championship put a set of brakes on the car this weekend. But to put a set of brakes on the thing is £1,600 per axle on each end, and then your brake pads are basically £200 a corner. So you're basically £2,000 for the front, £2,000 for the back, plus VAT for pads and disc and pads. So that's pretty much everybody across the board this weekend. You can see your face, but that's what you've got to do to be competitive. And most people are putting on a second set this weekend, or some people putting on a second set. But yeah, the parts that are really, that's relatively in budget. Like we plan to do a season, we plan to put brakes on it. You have to do that as part of what you're doing. So it's kind of like a written that we were going to have brake disc and pads at this round anyway. But yeah, like the front wing on an RS is basically £3,500. The headlight is £1,000, and then those little canards that you can see that I did 3 of this weekend, 477 quid plus VAT each.
Yeah, that's the outrageous bit on those, particularly, is that the canard that is no more than 6 inches long is so expensive in relative to the rest of it. And there's some guys doing one almost every session, but that's, again, it's because this the fibre that they use is the eco-friendly stuff, and it's a lot more expensive to mould. And if you think about the damage that you can do on an RS on a Carrera Cup car, which is ultimately the higher series, it's about 1/3 of the cost.
It's a bit backwards, really. I mean, the thing. Yeah. Do you know what though? Have you ever picked one of the wings up, Chris? They are. Yeah, they're so light. They are ridiculous. Like, I was going to say my wallet's heavier. It probably is by the time you put a couple of cards in it and a few coins. But yeah, that's like it. You know, I'm not lying. Like when they're new, they are so light. So they're an amazing bit of kit, and in some ways I can understand why they're that cost. But the reason that they're that cost and remain at that cost in the championship is because they are a homologated GT4 car. So to run that car anywhere else in the world, you can take it from Sprint Challenge and put it straight into British GT, European GT4, or any GT4 series in the world, and you'll be competitive with that car without a question of a doubt. And in a way, the reason part of it being so expensive on the front is what makes it so attractive, because the car doesn't lose value. And that's a really, really key part to the Porsche racing thing. So as much as I'm not happy to have had to buy a new wing or these bits, I did hit a tyre stack. It is my own fault, really. And part of the attraction of the championship is that it is a homologated GT4 car and keeps its value. So there is some kind of conflicting things, but I think for me, my opinion is that a big hard tyre stack has no place anywhere near the white lines of a racetrack. They just shouldn't be there. Quite what the answer is, I don't necessarily know. But I think things that can damage a car and cause damage to people is not good. So that is overall my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that are calling for, is it the Tech Pro barriers, the more spongy, foamy stuff? What's your Chris just made a face. Chris, let's go to you. What's your thoughts?
So when I was doing Clio Cup in 2007, which feels like a lifetime ago, and I suppose
I left school then, just to make you feel really old.
Oh, thanks. Well, thankfully I was only 19, turning 20, so I wasn't that far ahead of you. But we used the Tech Pros at Donington on the GP loop on that configuration. And in Clio Cup, they didn't have the extent of the gravel that we had there, but I was going across the grass, the backside of the Tech Pro barrier, pulling fifth, rejoining the circuit. So that is not a deterrent. And I've got some pictures of me nudging them out of the way from Clios when they put them on the original national circuit chicane. The one that was later before they had to make them mirror image of each other. So whilst they don't damage the car as much, they are, the track limits thing that we've got now that didn't really exist back then, become more of a swing. And I think, as Max was alluding to, the solution is very complex. We've got some very harsh rules in comparative to the rest of the world through MSUK on our track limits. And we've got parts of racetracks that are very, very enticing to drive across. And as a driver, it's our job to make a corner as straight as possible. Yeah. And at the chicane, even today, it was, the second part of the chicane, the one that did Max, that was gone. And of course, you're just left with those aluminium blocks. And there was a number of cars there running the same tyre that I was on, which is the same tyre, the Pirelli DHF that British GT and all the SRO championships run. And that tyre just goes across them and you don't even feel it. So where do you have people, you can't put a sausage in because we've seen what sausages do. Those aluminium stacks don't work and the original grass that was there didn't work. So, what is the solution and how is it found? Is it just a case of they put the gravel trap to the end and you dip a wheel? That seems to work pretty well for the Formula cars.
Has it got sensors?
Not at the chicane, no.
Because for the amount of... Go on, Max, go on.
So, I think just a few things on that. So, I don't think gravel works because it flicks up. In single seaters, that's obviously not good for people who are driving without a windscreen.
I'll tell you what I did. We were the first session out today after the GB3 and GB4 sessions, and you would think Clio Cup had been on the circuit at the exit of the whole hairpin and the exit of McLean's. There was just a gravel line, and they hadn't swept because they were just rattling them out. And I was like, I thought you guys are meant to be staying away from that. And they've got okay, the GB4 cars have got a halo, the GB3 cars don't, but they've got the shark fin that the Indy cars had for a little while, and they're dipping a wheel more than what the GT cars were.
Really? Yeah.
So I'm like, well, that clearly isn't a one for them, is it? They can't argue with that if they're using it all at old Hairpin and McLean's.
But you also have stones rattling around the track that then go through radiators, like what happened to Tom Ingram at the weekend. I've got to say, Donington, from a running a car point of view, as in my team manager hat on, and from when I raced in Clio Cup, Donington's the only place where we've taken alternator belts off or had stones go through things. So I'm not a fan of the gravel solution. I'm all for gravel being like there and stopping us hitting barriers and stuff.
Yeah, I think gravel's...
It doesn't work.
Yeah, gravel has got to be there to slow cars down before they hit the barriers if they can. That's predominantly what they're for.
There's two reasons I don't think Tech Pro works. One is because it's so soft and you're more likely to get a car hitting it and lifting up. So particularly with a front wheel drive car, I think you've got more chance to see more rolls. You'd probably have the same thing if you hit a tyre stack, to be fair. But I don't think a Tech Pro is necessarily a better solution on that front. Tech Pro barriers are also very expensive. So for circuits, it's not necessarily the solution. So I had a really good chat with Tracy Morley, who's the circuit manager at Croft Circuit, yesterday, because I do some work there, and she was saying like Tech Pros don't really work because they're so expensive. I sort of said like I'd almost rather they.
I was gonna say
but if you spread the love between everybody in a way that makes it work, then it's more affordable for all. What they are starting to introduce at Croft, and I think it could well be a bit of a solution, is how like on the outside of turn 1 they used to have like the full height floppy markers. I actually think one of the orange ones at Donington may have been what cracked my headlight at the hairpin, not actually the right-handed tyre stack. So I'm also not really a fan of big orange floppies. But they've introduced
do anything for 996.
Yeah.
Tanks, though.
Yeah. They've introduced some like soft but half height floppies so that you can if you've hit them, but they don't do damage to a car because they're quite soft, they fall over. And actually, I think that might well be some kind of way to be in the solution. The other option that I see is that you have like in an ideal world, you just want a sensor because it's dead easy then. But the problem with the sensor is that it doesn't reset quick enough. So if you're in a train of cars in a single make series, the front guy hits it, 2 and 3 get away with it free because it's not reset, and then 4th pings it. So you end up having like a train of cars where 2 people get a penalty, but not the others that are in the middle. And I suppose the other way of my thought is that if you have like a flopper, but it flops back up, it's a much easier telltale sign of a track limits offence for a judge of fat to be able to see and it wouldn't damage a car. So you could then put a judge of fat there and go, look, if somebody nudges that, it's track limits. If they don't nudge that,
so that's what they
it's
do
not.
That's what they do at the Variante Alto at Imola for ELMS and things like that. They've got a bollard. It's one of the thinner ones, like they use at Cadwell. That's quite soft, and because you're climbing across the first part of the chicane so much, if you knock it, it's clear as day, and it actually pings back really quickly. So even if a train of GT3 cars go through, it will either spring back in between, or it will stay down, which indicates that the cars are all just running over it.
They're all running,
and it seemed to work quite well for the ELMS races, and I think like Super Cup and things as well have been adopting it, and maybe that's an idea. Like I hadn't heard that Croft thing. So that would be the same, wouldn't it? It would react the same way if it gets knocked and then it stays down. Everyone's doing it. If it goes down and stays back up, and a couple of cars miss it, and it goes down, you're pinging the right cars rather than missing a few and then getting back to it.
Yeah, I mean the Croft one doesn't necessarily ping back up, but I think it's the premise of what it is. That solution would not damage cars, but still be able to get people for a track limits violation, and that's the key to it all.
Yeah, and I suppose, like you touched on it just now, Max, the human element, especially when you've got a judge of fact there. If you've got that visual aid to help them spot, right, that's a clear violation. And Chris, if it's working in Europe at tracks like Imola and the European Le Mans Series, I don't think, apart from the World Endurance Championship and IMSA, you probably couldn't get any bigger than that in terms of profile, how big the series is and the drivers kind of on display. I could be wrong. You may tell me different.
No, it's just the same drivers.
same drivers, just a different track.
Yeah.
I mean, so from your experience, Chris, I'll try and put this as diplomatic as possible because I know you work in Britain and all over Europe. Have the Europeans kind of got the track limits thing a bit better than the UK? Have they kind of got it right?
I think it's a better balance.
Yeah.
I think our rule is particularly grey because you are talking about a contact patch of the tyre and it, to the letter of the regulation over a curb, even if 99.9% of the tyre is on the curb, if 1 millimetre is technically over, that's a track limit violation here. Whereas at least in Europe and for FIA rules racing, where it is basically one tyre just has to be in contact still with the black bit, it's an easier spot. And I think particularly as circuits become safer, which of course is very good, but at the same time you're moving marshals further away. So they're trying to look at potentially a very small ingression over a curb where there might not be, gravel for some dust to pop up or, like Silverstone out of Brooklands, for example, Luffield rather, you've got a small element of green paint and then the gravel. So if you're that marshal that's now back against almost the museum, trying to look at that curb, that's probably 150 metres away. It's a fair distance, and if you're trying to just work that out, and then you've got to make that decision as the judge of fact, and then you've got to do that consistently, not just for that race, but for the day, the weekend. It's going to slip at some point, isn't it? And if you're trying to be consistent to the millimetre, that plus or minus tolerance of you looking is far more varied than looking for, is a bit of black tyre still on the racetrack. So I think in terms of what we've done over here is certainly a harder way of doing it. And what they've got over there, I think everyone agrees, just if we are going to have track limits, which I think we're going to have to live with, is probably an easier solution certainly for people to manage. And, we saw last weekend where you've got quite a number of large race meetings going on. So we had TOCA at Donington, there was the Car Fest, the Silverstone Classic, and you've got to populate judges of fact for those corners to this rule. There's only going to be X amount of people that are qualified to do that, X amount of people that could possibly see that far because, everyone's got different eyes. You're going to have a number of people that have got glasses or whatnot, and that's going to make a difference. So you start diluting those people. I think we just have to be thankful that it wasn't a British GT weekend as well. So we've had probably the majority of people at Donington for TOCA, but there will be weekends where it is diluted, and just taking that away and not having that problem with a simpler track limit rule that is ultimately clearer. I think the European and the FIA way of doing it sits better for competitor and probably officialing as well.
Fantastic, Max. Obviously, it can't save you now, but obviously you're going to get the bits fixed. But you can. I mean, I'll go back to Andrew Watson. He must have felt absolutely gutting. I think there was a bit of an issue with the way the car was recovered. I won't be too harsh because the marshals there are up against time, and they've obviously got a clerk of the course in the rear going, "Come on, hurry up! I want to get the race restarted." But I mean, I have a rough idea of what the costs are in touring cars. I'm probably way out of the ballpark. Andrew Watson's car, for losing the back end, what's that, 50, 60k of damage? A front corner smashed off to bits?
Yeah. It might not be that much, but yeah, it's going to be. It's certainly not going to be a couple of grand. It's going to be into the tens of it. It just depends how much damage it's done behind it and what it's pulled off. But yeah, you're going to be. I'd have thought you'd be over 10 and probably over 20. Where you're heading from there, I don't know. But that's when you look at my damage bill or Andrew's in relation to the budget that you've got for the season, then it's a significant part of it, and it's a big swing. For most people in budgeting, if you have a 5% sudden swing in budget, it's quite hard to manage in whatever industry you're in. If you're in a business and there's suddenly a problem on your production line, you've got 5% additional cost that you weren't expecting. You've got to work out where you pull some strings in some other areas to make things work. So, we're no different in motorsport, but to say on the marshalling team, actually we had one or two safety cars at the weekend, and we only had one. It was just really quick. Yeah, the marshals did a mega job of getting the cars out of the way. It was literally just into the gravel at turn one, and they're very accessible there. But I think we were literally a lap, maybe 2 laps under safety car, which was brilliant. David, who's like chief picker upper of cars at Donington, yeah, he's probably got a much posher title than that, but he's a bit of a legend, bit of a friend of mine now. He recovered my phone after I left it on a caterum one time at turn one, whilst the track was live. So I've owed him I've owed him a crate of recording or something like that for about a year, and I've never sorted it out. So we always have a bit of a laugh and a joke. But he's spot on. He came and asked me a couple of questions about how you recover the Caymans, because we don't have the lifting kits. I'm not sure whether the Cup cars do either. But because the homologated GT4 car, we can't go putting holes in the roof, just destroy the value. So the Marshall team were pretty on it really, but I think the crack is it's going to hurt somebody at some point, and it already has. The cost to fix cars when they hit Tyrestacks is not right. And it's not good for championships, or motorsport in general, or the circuits. And there's got to be a way to do it cheaper and safer and better for tracks, for marshals, for drivers, for budgets, for championships, for everybody concerned. There's got to be a better way of doing it than putting a big, massive tyre stack that's really heavy effectively right on the edge of the circuit. So my dad always says, if you were at a street circuit, you'd hit a wall. I said, yeah, but we're not. And I've elected to not be at a racetrack, a street circuit.
And that's the thing, because there's a few people saying like, well, just keep it within track limits. Then don't drive without track limits. Well, hang on, that didn't happen to Andrew Watson. He lost control of the car for whatever reason. Yeah. These things happen. You're pushing so close to the limit. And I'll actually swing the other way around. If you're a novice racer that's going out for their first race, they can make a mistake. And for a clubby, they can make a mistake, hit a tyre stack, and that writes off their whole year. And you're not seeing them then coming out for the rest of the year. So it's a real contrast.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, the immediate fiscal punishment is enough, but what will eventually happen, as you say, Rob, is that it will actually filter to the competition. So there's a possibility that some competitive advantage we could lose, because that money's gone into fixing that we can't put into brakes or tyres or whatever. We've got to see that. But if cars are being lost from championships because of these issues with these things, that's going to put organisers, and ultimately goes back into the circuit as a problem, because if there's not cars competing, there's no revenue. So it's an immediate fiscal hit for the driver that was whatever done, but as a broader picture and a longer term picture, is that financial hit actually going to cause people to stay away from the sport, or just defer them? And it could lose them for, even if it's 6 months. There's championships that are struggling to get 10 cars. You lose one car, that's 10% of your entry. that cost, it doesn't work for the organizer. So then does the championship go? What happens? It's a rippling effect outwards from one, fiscal event, which can really hurt a lot of people in terms of livelihood and or enjoyment.
All right, and that is a very much a real thing. Like,
outstanding point.
Following our incident at Alton Park earlier in the year, you kind of budget to have some element of crash damage, but that was over
unnecessary.
What I budgeted for. Yeah, it was. I mean, the incident was unnecessary, and like, I don't know whether we've actually talked about that on here, but yeah, the incident was unnecessary. Seb's apologised. Seb had his penalty. No problem with that. That's done, in the past. But the damage has meant that we've had to control the budget much more tightly up till Donington Park than we would have done had we not had that. So since then, I had a set of tyres at Croft, basically in addition to the race weekend. But other than that, I've not had any tyres out of my allocation, where pretty much everybody else across the front of the field is throwing at least a set of tyres at each of the Porsche official test days and the TOCA test days. We're not able to do that because we just don't have the budget to do that. This latest thing, yeah, we'll finish the year. How? Where the budget will come from to do it, I don't know. Like, because it has put another $6,000 on top of what I planned. So, where I might have been looking to try and do tyres at the last two meetings because I'm in the chance for a championship hunt, that's wiped out my ability to do that. And part that's my fault. I hit a tyre stack. I'm not sitting here blaming anybody else, but if the tyre stack wasn't there, I certainly helped it.
So let me come at you with something else as well then, Max. So arguably you're racing, and again, Chris has pointed to how close these one make series are. Yeah. And the one big thing about the TOCA package in general is it's not only there because it's some of the best race series in the country, you're there to entertain as well. There are big crowds that turn up to these events. Yeah. There are, there's quite a free-to-air TV is king. Commercially for you guys, it's everything to strive for commercial that you're able to offer commercially. So a lot ties to that. So if you're going to kind of have to back off just that little bit going through the chicane because shit, is that going to be $6,000, another $6,000, and that affects you down the line? It rolls back.
I'm pleased that we're going to Silverstone and Brands Hatch that don't have these things, because the thought of doing any more is pretty horrendous. Like, we'll finish the season, but it'll be hard. Do you know what I mean? And there isn't the ability to put tyres on it on test days as a result of the cost of this last weekend. So it's going to be tough.
And from a sporting point, as you said, Rob, these championships are so close. So there was guys throwing 3 sets of tyres on at the last official Porsche test, which is great. If you can do it, it's fantastic because ultimately you only get to drive a new tyre in qualifying. And if you can maximise that tyre to another half a tenth because you've had more sets, as we said earlier, the closeness of the series, that could be the difference between 8th and 7th, or 8th and 5th, 8th and
pole
3rd,
and 4th. That's the big for us.
Pole and 4th.
That's our trick.
That's how it works. So if there's costs going out elsewhere, yes, it hurts us sportingly. And it puts us in a position where we have to be clever, let's say, how we use what we have. And hopefully for us, in a sporting sense, that works out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right, we're 40 minutes into this podcast already, and we're going to take a little bit of time out for the Driven Minds Minute. Now, we've done it with Max, we've done it with Paul, and we're going to do it with our guest for the first time. Now, for our listeners out there, the Driven Minds Minute is talking about mindset and the brain as you look into the motorsport side of things with Driven Minds, the mental health motorsport charity. And Chris, the question I've got for you this week, you look after the likes of Max and Ethan Hamilton and some fantastic drivers in various Porsche racing series. And when you're fighting for a championship as their driver coach is there any way that you have to adjust your techniques with each driver, especially as you go later on into a season while they're fighting for a championship?
Yeah, and motorsport is one of those things that is actually incredibly mental. In terms of performance, like the driver I was working with today, she can swing seconds a lap just on the word focus being on the pit wall. So it does change how you approach things, and basically, I'm quite big into the psychology part of this, and working with, I do quite a lot with iZone and working and following their mindfulness and all of the bits there as part of their program, and it helps significantly to just make sure that you are, and particularly with Max, how we approach the rest of the year, is that every time when we get in that car, we make sure we're in the right mindset to perform and do our best absolutely every time, because we can now no longer affect to have one forward, rather to have one bad session. So mindset wise, yes, I have to work with different drivers of different ways of doing it. Some people don't subscribe to it at all, and you just have to accept that that's how it is. Others are more receptive. I'm quite thankful for, both. In fact, I think 3 of my 4 drivers are particularly into the mindfulness and really using that. And again, I think both Max and Ethan are signed up to the iZone bits and doing the mindfulness links there. Our AMs are also, pretty into it. I'm not sure where Jake sits quite on it yet. I've said a few things to him and sent him a few videos, but not had much response back. But yeah, everyone is slightly different with it, and it is such a crucial part of the sport, particularly as we do, funnel down to that championship decider. One poor session, whether that be a qualifying or just overdriving in a race, because the points are tight, and the difference between a first and a second is also very slim in the points difference, that could be the swing. So using that and using the mental performance side of things is something I'm quite into, and working with drivers. And yes, I do have to do it differently with everyone and pick and choose which bits I use. So like today, for example, with my driver, just getting her to focus before she goes into the car, we've started a bit more of a physical pre-race routine, because I was reading some articles that the dopamine release.
Yeah.
When you exercise and have an elevated heart rate for X period of time, increases attention and focus by X%. So I had a skipping, I had a running up and down the truck, then we went to some reaction stuff, and then plugged her in the car.
Okay.
We saw some nice results from that today, which was pretty good, considering we'd not considered it or done anything with it before, just purely just trying to mentally rehearse some things. That's what we'd done. But working on it in a little bit more and coming at it from a slightly different way has worked for that driver. I know I'm not going to get Max and Ethan to jump up and down on a skipping rope, because God forbid, I do not want to see Max jump up and down with his Nomex on.
Cheeky bugger.
So yeah, I have to plan things differently for all my drivers. Yes.
Fantastic. A great answer, and well more than 1 minute, as all the answers have been for the Driven Minds Minute. Don't forget, head on to the Driven Minds website. They've got some great merch, including some nice wristbands like these as well. But an absolute honour to be an ambassador for Driven Minds, raising awareness for mental health issues in motorsport and mindset. So Chris, again, thank you for coming on to this podcast. I want you to tell us now basically how your career started and all the way through right up until now. So now you're a professional driver coach, but where did it all start for you? And tell us about your very varied and wonderful career.
So I've been very fortunate to have a nearly 30-year career in motor racing now. So I grew up around Silverstone, and we weren't a football family. And living, birthday weekend was the F1 in the middle of July. So there was always a lot of things going on. You could hear the cars when they had some proper engines in them, and there was something there. And there's a video, I think my second birthday, maybe my first, where I'm tapping the screen, and it's Prost in the McLaren. So I guess that would be my first birthday, 88. And that's really the first warning my parents should have had. But back then, when I started, I've got to a point where I could get into a go-kart. I was only 8 years old. Now you can do it at 4. And I was very fortunate enough that we could do that. And, there was a bit there, but we weren't wealthy enough to just go out and jump straight away. So we couldn't afford wets for the first year that I was racing. I think now looking back, actually that helped me because now my car control's pretty good. I do a lot of precision driving for film and TV and stuff, and skidding cars about. But fortunate enough to be pretty good at that, and then moved to the national levels and was still pretty good. Then it started with the international karting side and finishing off in racing like Formula like ICA and Formula A in Europe for right karts and being supported by them. Then we had to make the decision at 18 because, again, the junior car series didn't exist really, apart from T cars, which was never going to be an option.
Yeah.
The problem I had is that when I hit about 16, I had a bit of a growth spurt, and I'm now 6'2" and was at 15, 16, 17. And when, doing European and World Championship karting where the top 20 are on the same thousandth, that was a problem.
I can imagine because like weight and everything, it's just...
Weight wasn't so much of a problem, but a high centre of gravity was. I had James Collado just draft me as a sale and just pull out and just drive off, and then it was, just giving away these things to Le Mans winners that, it's all good, isn't it? But then I moved to car racing, and again we couldn't quite do it how we wanted to. So my first race car was a Fiat Uno. Proper Mark 1 Fiat Uno.
Love it.
Yeah, it ran on a Matador Slick, which is a compound that Barney Rubble would have been familiar with. It was rock hard. They barely wear, but basically the feeder for them to get onto TOCA was Clio Cup. And, to learn the circuits and do it in a way that we could afford to initially was the Fiat Unos. And it was a great little championship. The BRSCC ran it. It had been going for a fair number of years. The competition was pretty good. There's still guys out there with cars and things doing now. We were very fortunate enough to get a good result in that and win that out the first bat. Then we moved to Clios in the big leagues, and it was like, okay, well, this is a different game. And, like Max, we had to economise with the budget and everything. But we had a good crack at that. And in that year, there was so many entries. I think it was 57 entries or 52, something like that. They actually ran heats in a final. So you qualified in groups based on your practice times. You then had a heat race, and the X percentage of the guys that were in the top 12, I think it was, then moved to the final. It was half, depending on what the circuit maximum was, because every grid was full for the Clios that year. So we did, first year of that, and racing at that sort of level in cars was good fun. We won what became the graduate championship. It was the rookie championship then, and we were 8th overall. Then, some more people started going, oh, this kid's, pretty good. And there's, sort of 19 turning 20. We had an opportunity to do touring cars, which was more of a distraction, really, because GTs and sports cars is always where I wanted to be. But,
okay.
At that time, it was, can't really turn this down. And it was going to be with the same team I raced with Clios with. We were going to run the Chevy Lassettis. And a lot of people were putting in place. Unfortunately, we lost the sponsor that we had. It was a pretty eminent car parking firm on Christmas Eve 2007. So that put a bit of a downer on that. And fair play, Chevrolet were really good. RML that were doing the engine lease were bending over backwards to get us in the car, but it just wasn't going to happen. And then it fortunately, silver lining, and one door closes, another door opens. That put me to the GT3s, and in the early days of GT3 cars, when a Porsche GT3 was a detuned Carrera Cup car, not the fire-breathing monster that they've become now.
Yeah.
So then that put me into the GT cars, and that really just sort of where everything went off. And I was very fortunate enough to drive for some manufacturers in that, and Jaguar and Alpina, and just doing a lot of test work and racing some cool guys. I then met some gentleman drivers doing that, raced with them for a while, gained some success, won some races in Black Pan Endurance Series, which is now the Fanatec Series in the endurance side, before even the Sprint Championship existed, because that's what FIA GT3 as it was really big, and they were 1 hour sprints. Then that sort of faded away when the Aero came into GT3, and it became sort of the Blank Pan series that was far more endurance based, and then the Sprint series came later. And then from there, working with the gentleman drivers and meeting people, got into Carrera Cup, which is where the Porsche affinity started. And as a career route, it's just fantastic. You become part of this Porsche it's not a cult, but it's
fraternity.
A fraternity, that's a good word. Yeah, well, that wasn't come to my brain. And then from there, just started coaching on track days and working with people on the racing side. And then it just very fortunate that it snowballed. And I now, 90% of my clients are in Porsches, and, working with guys like Max and meeting gentleman drivers. So I've got, clients that are racing in Porsche Club, clients that are racing in Ferrari Challenge and things like this, and all sorts of opportunities present themselves through those. And, I'm very fortunate that I make my living and pay my mortgage driving racing cars and being around this sort of thing, which is, ultimately what I've loved to do since, the video of me as a 1-year-old tapping on the screen in 1988. So, and, fast forwarding now, I'm working with, 3 different championships, a variety of different drivers. And, last week I was, 7 days on the bounce, going from Anglesey to Donington to Alton to Donington to Croft to Donington, all of these places, and, just having a fantastic time, enjoying myself, and, being able to support my family.
Absolutely fantastic. And I kind of going back to the Clio Cup side of it then. So would that have been the Gen 2 Clio Cup, the really tiny Clio Cup?
No, it was the first year of the Gen 3, the 197.
So we're talking like drivers around that. Tom Onslow Cole, Paul Rivette.
Paul Rivette was in the championship. Ed Peed was in the championship. Martin Byford won the championship. Ben Winrow. Who else was kicking around? The top 10 were names.
Oh, yes.
Mickey Doyle. Who else? Christ, just pushing my memory.
Glue.
I'm looking at a bottom of my car, but nothing's coming to me.
Yeah.
Phil Glue, yeah, that's a good shout. He must have been around there.
Glue was the year after me.
Yeah.
He didn't do any races in that year. But Steph Hodgetts, he was pushing for the championship for the year. Who else? I'm just trying. I've got a picture of quite a good picture of my helmet on a tyre stack and me P1 or P2 in the test at Rockingham. I'm trying to read that list down, but it's not coming to me. But it was quite. Ethan's. Aaron Taylor Smith. He's now in touring cars. But really didn't factor too much in the Clios that year. But there's a fair few guys that have gone on to do some cool things, and it's quite cool to be able to show some result sheets every now and again and just be like, just remember.
Been there and done that, pal. Do you have to kind of lay down the law with the driver every now and again? Just slap it on the table. Remember that,
it's
mate.
Funny, some people just 37 now, sort of past the prime as it might be, but still hop in a race car and people go, oh, okay. Particularly if you're working with a younger driver, they're like, oh, okay, this boy knows something, which still puts a smirk on my face.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely, Max. Talk us apart from we've spoken about the Tyrestacks, so let's not talk about that. Just tell us about your Donington weekend. Yeah,
I mean, I really enjoyed listening to Chris's pass there. Actually, it's always
great,
isn't
it?
See where other drivers have gone to, and I've obviously had the lure of touring cars, but now I think I'd be firmly, following in Chris's footsteps of wanting to go and race in GT cars, really. So yes, it is interesting. So Chris and I don't know whether it was where we first met, but Chris has forgotten a massive part of his racing career, which was you know exactly where I'm going to with this, don't you?
Yeah.
The 24-hour kart race is like the highlight of Chris's racing career. I can't believe he never mentioned it.
Chris, Le Mans 24 is always what I wanted to do, and that was box ticked.
We did it in a kart. So, yeah, Chris and I were teammates for that. But I don't know what year that was. It's going back quite some time now.
I fear it's closer to 15 years ago than we both care to want to acknowledge.
That is quite amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. So, yeah, Chris and I go back a fair way. I think we're a 4-car driver team. We had a good laugh that year. It was good fun. So,
it was fun.
Donington weekend for me was a pretty good one. I think the fact that we're leading the championship probably makes it feel better than it maybe. It was good. We had 2 podiums. I can't complain with that. But
I think we're a little biased after Croft, aren't we? Where we had such a fantastic weekend, and if anyone else came away with 2 podiums and a 4th, they'd be thinking that was a bloody good weekend.
Yeah.
But when we come away from Croft having won, I think as a team we took 13 or 12 trophies home.
Yeah.
You sort of
the expectation is that that's what's going to happen every time. I mean, so race 1 at Donington is only my 2nd time that I've not been on the podium all year. So for me, not being on the podium is underachieving on where I feel like I should be, which is on one of those 3 steps on the podium every time. So race 1 was a little disappointing. Really, that came because qualifying didn't massively go to plan. First half of quali was really good, right at the front. Was happy as Larry that I was going to be pole, really, and we put new tyres on and expected to go and wipe the floor, to be fair, and it didn't really work. I came back in like 7th and 4th and thought, oh bloody hell, what's going on here? But I mean, to be fair, I think part of it was in my driving. It probably wasn't as good as what it had been in the first stint of qualifying, but I also got massively held up on a lap that would have been not good enough for pole, but good enough for second. Would have meant we'd have started the 2 races second, but Am driver in the RS class just got in my way at the hairpin and went from being half a second up to being well down. So when you consider that 2/10 would have put me second, half a second up with 2 corners to go was a pretty surefire way to have been second. And then pace wise after that was mega. So our first time that we've been setting fastest laps in races in the dry. So we had 2 fastest laps, which is a really, really good achievement. Probably for me the highlight of the weekend was actually having fastest lap. So it's something that's proved to me that we're not just there and being consistent and finishing on the podium. We've really got the pace to take it and win dry races on merit, not just by other people having time penalties or whatever. So that was a massive strong point for me. 4th or 5th in race. I think 4th. Fourth or 5th. Yeah, is it 4th? It's a bit weird because Joe Marshall's not actually in the championship. I kind of get lost of with who's where. I think we were 4th in race 1 and then a pair of 3rds. So it was a good weekend. I feel like there could be maybe a little bit more from it, but I think I had to just manage each race as it came and extract the most amount of points from it, and ultimately going for another overtake on Joe in race 2, and so on and so forth would have probably put me in a worse position than it would have done better. So I'm happy to be leading the championship, and that is obviously the main focus with what we want to do.
Fantastic. And just to round off, we're just getting to the hour mark on a podcast. I don't think we've ever done that before, Max. So I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. I think to finish off, guys, just let us know what you're doing in the next few weeks. Obviously, busy. You've got some conclusions of your seasons coming up. So, Chris, what are you doing in the next few weeks?
So I've got a couple of track days and test days with my Porsche Club drivers. They're racing at Donington on the GP Loop on the 14th of September. So looking forward to that. And then the weekend after with Sprint Challenge. And then, sort of peppered in between with some coaching in simulator and some coaching on track days and things as well.
Fantastic. And you, Max?
Yeah, so next week we've got track day on Friday at Brands, then going to British GT on the Saturday for a bit of a recce at what we're looking at doing with my team for next year, some Ginetta launches and kind of some interesting stuff around that we're going to have a look at with a view to the team being in British GT in a couple of years' time would be nice. So that's what we're looking at doing that weekend, and then going to support my brother in the Great North Run, and then we've got the final of the Britcar Trophy Series before we're back at Silverstone for the next and penultimate round of Sprint Challenge.
Just quickly, Max, obviously you mentioned your brother doing the Great North Run there. Where can people send any donations to?
Yes, he's got a Just Giving page going. I'm sure it's that way. So he's raising for British Heart Foundation. He actually just completed Coast to Coast in a day a couple of weeks ago. So he's the fair play to him. And then he's doing half marathon Great North Run in just like in a week's time. So he's had a big effort. He's raising for British Heart Foundation. He's one of my friends, a lad called Lucas. Sadly, he had a double cardiac arrest whilst he was playing football. He was actually on. He's still alive. He's good now.
Okay.
And he was on BBC Breakfast this week with Vinnie Jones, and a guy called Tom, who fortunately was at that football match and saved his life by giving him CPR. So they were on BBC Breakfast this week, but he's raising. He's raising on behalf of that. So yeah, did you realise it was Lucas who's come with us a few times or not?
Absolutely not.
No. So Lucas, Lucas is one of my best mates.
Cool.
Has been a mechanic when we were in Pyro and along the line. So he's the story kind of folds from him. So yeah, it's great to see that Greg's supporting one of my mates. So yeah. Just Giving's the place to go to. So I'll have to stick a link on socials.
Definitely will need to do that. Well, fantastic, guys. Great to have you on to chat about them stupid tyre stacks, some great racing and a great career by Chris Dymond. But from myself, Robert Lewis, from Max Coates and from our awesome guest, Chris Dymond, it's goodbye for now from the Driving Talk podcast. We'll see you guys next week.
Cheers, bye.